As one of the largest and fastest growing minorities in the United States, the Latino population has had a significant influence in the transformation of the American landscape. Since the 1960s, their presence in American popular culture has increased considerably, and they have consequently shaped many socio-cultural and economic facets of the United States today. However, their portrayal in many films and television shows, as well as their presence as directors and creative writers in Hollywood, has historically been very limited, and are largely influenced by representations constructed by Anglo Americans that limit the perception of their culture. These representations often follow a perpetual narrative, which in turn has shaped not only the way that Latinos are perceived in real life, but also the way that Latinos themselves internalize these messages. The main concerns around Latinx representation in Hollywood are tied to three prominent issues: racial or ethnic stereotypes, lack of representation, and lack of recognition. Because Hollywood is dominated by white American males, many film writers have constructed certain images of Latino characters that more or less follow the same storyline. They are often cast in sideline roles like maids, labor workers, criminals, etc. Latinos are offered less than their fair share of meaningful roles, and when they do get offers, they're often stereotypical. For example, Sofia Vergara from Modern Family, who plays the spicy Latina. Actors like Vergara often need to fit specific parts or a prepackaged idea of what being a Latino looks like. These types of characters perpetuate controlling images in the media and ultimately reinforce false representations of the Latino community. Although Hispanics account for 18% of the U.S. population, they only make up 3% of characters in films, and this is partly due to whitewashing. One of the most famous examples of this is West Side Story, which is a forbidden love story that explores racial tensions in New York City. The film features Puerto Rican characters played by white actors in brownface. Despite the wealth of talent in underrepresented communities, Latino actors are not given the same opportunities, and they are also not being recognized. When we look at the Oscars, only one Hispanic man has ever won Best Actor, and the last Hispanic actor to win an Oscar was Penelope Cruz in 2009. Although we have made some recent progress, there is still a significant amount of work to be done in the industry. The purpose of our video is to spread awareness of these issues and ultimately express the importance of exploring the complexities of the Latino demographic. Latinos are an incredibly diverse ethnic group, and it is important to have accurate representations of their lives.
For many years, filmmakers have been stereotyping men in Latin movies. These stereotypes are oftentimes offensive and can be considered racist. Although Latin actors are participating in what they believe is an innocent role in filmmaking, the industry continuously portrays these men in various negative ways. In majority of today's popular films, it seems as if male Latino actors are being categorized into certain roles. These roles consist of 7 major characters, which include gangbangers, immigrants, farmers, maids, low-income fathers, banditos, and male buffoons. Here are some top movies that depict the roles being played by Latin men. In many popular films, it is common to see that a major role played by a Latin actor is a gangbanger. Various actors are dressed up with baggy and loose clothing and have tattoos from head to toe to showcase a tougher-looking man. Throughout the film, he is advised to take part in criminal acts and be involved with drugs and violence. The gangbanger role played by these men have given society and those who watch the films a negative outlook on Latin men in real life. American Me and Once Upon a Time in Mexico are perfect movies that justify top Latino actors being given the roles of gangsters. Another movie that justifies Latin actors being forced to play negative roles is A Better Life. The movie is about a poor father who sends his boy to the United States for a better life. It is another example of top film producer stereotype in the Latin community. While films ever since society can remember have been racist towards Latins, a topic that is growing more and more sensitive throughout the United States is the immigration status and laws. Latin actors are being forced to play a part in immigration circumstances and situations in movies. Although it is a touchy subject in our day and age, no changes have been made in the culture of filmmaking. Filmmakers should be culturally aware that films are portraying Latins in a negative way, which aligns with some of society's standing beliefs that the Latins are a problem in the United States. Unfortunately, this is another problem Latins face. When Latins migrate to the United States, they want a new start in order to provide for their families. Consequently, by placing these Latin men into these specific negatively portrayed roles, it is allowing the audience of the film to be stereotypical towards Latins in our everyday society. These filmmakers have carried the discrimination of the past to our modern day films by assigning Latin men to play the blue collar working role and the mafia men role, which has evidently become a social norm that the most people in the audience are oblivious to the racist gestures.
Over the years, there has been a lot of stereotyping of the Latinx community in advertisements. Despite the existence of different racial and national ideologies throughout the U.S. cultural dominance, whiteness has been naturalized as the ideal. There are numerous ways that stereotyping is being executed, such as the Latinx community not being portrayed as diverse as they actually are, and the sexualizing of Latina women. Despite all the stereotyping, Latino advertisers are finding different ways to poke fun at all the media's displays of cliches about the Latinx community. Racist representations of the Latinx community are not something that is new or unheard of to the business of advertising. As a matter of fact, it's actually been occurring for decades. For as long as the racist portrayals have been around, long-standing Latinx media activists and organizations have outspokenly criticized Spanish-language media for their racist portrayals of the Latinx community. There are a lot of racial stereotypes about different cultures in advertisements, such as the commercial where Coors alludes to Puerto Ricans as being drunks. It was created for New York's National Puerto Rican Day ad campaign. Many think that the beer company was trying to equate being Puerto Rican with being drunk. In reality, the Puerto Rican culture is an extremely diverse culture that has a very strong musical tradition, but instead they gained a negative stereotype of being drunks because of this commercial. The ad was eventually pulled. The sexualized stereotype of Latinas is flaunted, and the goal for these advertisers is to gain as much profit as possible for these products. Rather than actually focusing on the integrity of the product itself, it focuses on sexualizing Latinas or just women in general. In 2004, there was a commercial where the beer brand Tecate called Latinas hot. For Cinco de Mayo, it brought along a supposedly tongue-in-cheek Tecate billboard that showed a chilled bottle of beer with the words, "Finally, a cold Latina." This is a very clear example of how Latinas are overly sexualized. To poke fun at all the stereotypes of the Latinx community, there are several ad producers who are making print ad feature graphics that chart different stereotypes in movies. There are advertisements such as this chart that shows the maid category being highest by far. They are trying to find ways to keep the advertisements fun, and in reality, there is a slight truth behind some of the advertisements. In Latino advertising industry, they are trying to keep the advertisements heavy on humor and light on cultural references as a way to blur the lines of the Latino and the non-Latino market. By doing this, it makes the advertisement to be taken as something that is funny rather than something that's offensive.
For centuries, whitewashing characters in movies has been a recurring problem in the U.S. Whitewashing is a casting practice in the film industry in which white actors are cast in historically non-white character roles. For the Latinx community, this is especially the case as there has been more white actors taking on roles of Latinx individuals. Although Hollywood today claims and looks like it is more diverse than it was years ago, we can see that is not necessarily the case. As early as the 20th century, whiteness has been the norm being showcased in almost every film. Whiteness can be described as displaying white culture as being dominant over other cultures. White actors have been portraying different races by playing themselves, but claiming to be another race by altering their appearances and sometimes exaggerating certain features to perpetuate certain stereotypes held within a race. Take, for example, Paul Money playing Mexican President Benito Juarez and Bette Davis playing Empress Carlota in Juarez. Both did nothing to change their appearances drastically and spoke with accents. Since both actors were clearly not Latinx, this highlighted differences within both cultures and demonstrated how white culture would always remain dominant since they were casted over a Latinx actor. When you have a film industry that is disproportionately white males, chances are there isn't going to be much Latinx representation, which easily led to Hollywood normalizing whitewashed characters. From the mid-20th century to now, the momentum of the civil rights movement caused a shift in the way people of color were casted in Hollywood. It gave a greater chance for people of color to represent their culture and bring forth a different perspective on their lives. Hollywood claims that it is now diverse, but is it really? According to a study done by the Media Diversity and Social Change Initiative at the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, they found that diversity on screen falls far below that of the U.S. population. The study found that individuals from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups comprise just over a quarter of all speaking characters, with the Latinx community being the least represented. Although more integration is happening within the film industry compared to the early 20th century, there is still a problem with casting white actors in non-white roles. Hollywood is more concerned about having credibility when it comes to hiring actors that the idea of having a new Latinx actor play any of these roles is out of the question. It is more of a what's going to bring in profit mentality, but by having white people play, replace, and stereotype Latinx characters, it only obscures and erases their history, agency, and power. When actions like this occur within the entertainment business, it is difficult to see anything but an industry under the grip of a small group of white male US-based investors with a very specific idea of the kind of Latinx they want to see in the US, the kind of Latinx they can sell or sell to. They perpetuate stereotypes while simultaneously whitewashing and exoticizing some Latinx and demonizing and criminalizing others.
In recent years, Latin American directors and filmmakers have been extremely successful. In particular, Mexican American directors have excelled and found themselves at the center of nationwide praise for their work and achievements. With many awards under their belts and great films to show for their work, these directors still have much ahead of them. And while it may be hard finding a place in Hollywood as a young minority, these directors have surely found their place and will hopefully pave the way for more diversity on the big screen. In the past 5 years, 3 directors have stood out among the rest. Referred to as the Three Amigos, Guillermo del Toro, Alejandro González Iñárritu, and Alfonso Cuarón have won 4 out of the 5 last Academy Awards for Best Director, and were all either nominated or won for overall Best Picture in those years as well. This recent success gives many Latinx individuals hope for more diversity on the big screen, and more chances to make a name for themselves in Hollywood. After these award-winning directors had found their prominence, lesser-known Mexicans were also finding success, both in the U.S. as well as abroad. These directors, such as Carlos Regadas and Amat Escalante, may not be Oscar winners, but they have garnered success at home and overseas. There are also multiple directors, such as Eugenio Derbez, who are finding success in the Spanish-speaking audiences of the United States. However, there are mixed feelings on the success of the Three Amigos. One of the main criticisms is the lack of other Latin Americans in their productions. Both the cast and crew in these critically acclaimed Oscar-winning films have been overly whitewashed, excluding minorities from both actor positions as well as members of production and crew. Many Latinx people in the industry feel like they have been forgotten and have criticized these award-winning films for not doing justice for their people and their culture. In regards to Iñárritu's Birdman, actress and director Fanny Valise commented, showing her frustration at the lack of any people of color in a film that takes place in New York City, a city full of people from many different nationalities and many different cultures. Another actress and producer, Jennifer Behrens, feels like we, Latin Americans, have less opportunities to get in those doors because Hollywood has this romantic idea of finding talent internationally and neglecting the talent they have in their backyard. However, many Latinx individuals in the industry still praise these 3 for all the work they have done and the success that they have brought to the Latin American culture. While there are mixed opinions about the Three Amigos directors, these industry leaders have made a name not only for themselves, but for Latin Americans as a whole. There is still a gap that needs to be filled, but even slow progress is still a big leap toward diversifying the director's chair in Hollywood.
In the 90 years since the Oscars award show first began, only 5 actors with Latino backgrounds have won Oscars. The last time there was a Hispanic nominee for an Oscar was in 2009. The Emmy Awards have the same patterns of inclusion as the Oscars. At the 2017 Emmy Awards, not a single Latin actor, director, producer, or writer was nominated for any of the awards available. The last time a Latin actress won an Emmy was in 2007 when America Ferrera won Outstanding Lead Actress for Ugly Betty. Before that, there hasn't been a Latin actor who has won an award since 1990. It's unfortunate that there had to be a 17-year gap before another actor of Latin descent won an award. The nonprofit organization National Hispanic Media Coalition did a count of the top 100 acting nominations of the 2017 Emmy Awards, and the findings were quite shocking. 2 Latinos were nominated and only 1 of them won. 74 whites were nominated and 11 won. 20 Black Americans were nominated and 3 of them won, and 4 Asian Americans were nominated and 1 won. In an interview for Variety magazine, Mexican actor and producer Eugenio Derbez explained why he believes that there's a massive underrepresentation of Latinx in Hollywood. Derbez explained that the main issue is a lack of diversity among studio executives. He said, "For me, that's the main problem, because everything comes from the top. I can see it in their eyes when you're pitching an idea that you're excited about, something that you know will bring Latinos to theaters, and they're not familiar with what I'm saying. That's why when we find a Latino or Latina who's an executive that can hear our pitch, it's a completely different conversation." In the same article, it was mentioned, which also was previously stated, that about a quarter of moviegoers, or roughly 23% in 2016, were Latin or Hispanic. In a second interview in the article, Mexican actress and producer Salma Hayek explains an interesting hypothesis. Hayek says that Hollywood producers do not care to serve the interests of most of their audiences. Hayek provides an example. It was the same thing with women. Women would go to the movies to go with their date or their kids, so why bother with what they want to see? If over half of the population are women, why shouldn't Hollywood producers take women's interests into consideration? They believed women would only go to movie theaters because their husbands, boyfriends, or kids want to go, and women just tag along because they get a little time out of the house. Hayek believes that this is the same thing going on with the Latinx community. It's not like we're going to stop going to movie theaters just because they don't have Latinx actors or are given honorary awards. You will enjoy going to the movies still on a date, hanging out with friends, or just spending time with the family.
Despite recent improvements, the long history of stereotypes and underrepresentation has had lasting effects in our society. In a study conducted by the Broadcast Education Association, a group of professors addressed the consequences of such media content on members of minority groups. They acknowledged there are many studies that demonstrate exposure to certain characterizations of Latinos are associated with a range of unfavorable intergroup outcomes among white audiences, including stereotyping, attribution biases, and unsympathetic policy decisions. But what they also discovered was that for Latino communities, it can help foster social learning and promote internalization of stigmas and social stereotypes. The study illustrates that negative representations can have much larger societal implications, and this is why it is important to have positive media representations because mass media has the power to shape the perception of our world. In order for there to be true representative justice, we as a society must understand that Latinos come from many different backgrounds, all with varying customs. Although racial stereotypes might not be of utmost importance to Anglo-Americans, it can have detrimental impacts to Latino communities when they begin to internalize these racist ideals and become less likely to take pride in their own identity and culture. When children grow up seeing these actors on screen, they begin to believe that this is how their lives are going to play out. However, actors like Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin and Oscar Isaac in The Force Awakens are changing up the narrative and providing a platform for new opportunities and representations. Additionally, we are beginning to see more Mexican representation on several major television networks and film studios, like Coco, a Disney Pixar film. Although mainstream media still excludes other groups of Latinos in South and Central America, there is still a learning process that must take place in order to make progress toward change. There are small steps being taken, but in order to address the underlying issues, there must be a systematic and institutional change. People need to alter their perceptions of Latinos and correct the misinformation that false representations maintain. We can no longer live in ignorance. Latinos' voices need to be heard and their stories told. This is where the conversation starts, and making an effort goes a long way.